Hi there, folks. Welcome back to the WP-Tonic Roundtable show. This is 233. We've got a great panel, I might say. Got some favourites, and we've got some new people joining us, or a new guest. I think we've got some great news stories. I think it's going to be a great show. I'm going to let the panel quickly introduce themselves, and then we're going to go straight into the news section, which I know from the feedback you all really like. Larry, would you like to introduce yourself quickly?
Sure. And I probably should have warned you, Jonathan, that I'm kind of a weirdo. I'm a dual career professional with an event organizing habit. I make my living as a content strategist, but I also do massage therapy. But those are just to pay the bills so that I can do community event organizing. I'm putting together WordCamp Seattle this year. I do some other stuff here in Seattle. If you've ever heard of Ignite, the Ignite talk format, we put together Ignite Seattle. I'm on that organizing team. And I just kind of live to bring people together and share interesting ideas.
It sounds lovely. Absolutely lovely. Lee, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm Lee. I'm the host of the WP Innovator podcast, which is a podcast for designers, design agencies. And when I'm not doing that, I run an agency called Angled Crown, and we make WordPress themes that have been designed by designers. That's us.
Oh, great. Do you offer a massage as well, Lee?
I utterly hate massaging people because I'm way too lazy. Although I prefer to be massaged, so I've noted down Larry's services, and I'll be in touch.
Oh, great. My former co-host and great guy in general, John, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure thing. My name is John Locke. My business is Lockdown Design, and what I do is I provide SEO consultation for established businesses of the mid-size variety.
Sounds great to me. Sallie, would you like to introduce yourself?
Certainly. My name is Sallie Goestch, and my business is WP Fangirl. I'm the organizer of the East Bay WordPress meetup, and I write a lot of tutorials about using the events calendar.
Sounds great. And my new co-host, and just a great person in general, Kim, would you like to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. I'm Kim Shivler. I'm a business and technology trainer, including WordPress topics focused on online courses and membership platforms.
And I'm your main host, Jonathan Denwood. I'm the founder of WP-Tonic. We're a WordPress maintenance support company, your trusted partner. So let's get on with it. Let's go on to Larry. Like you say, you're the main organizer of WordCamp Seattle. It looks like it's going to be that's in November, isn't it? Was it the what's the actual dates?
It's coming up 5 weeks from tomorrow, November 4th and 5th. And I'm actually the co-organizer. There's two of us co-leading a team of, I think we're up to 17 people on the organizing team now.
And you got some Norwegian guy that's going to be one of your speakers, isn't he?
That's true.
What's this guy? What's his name?
Oh, he's going to talk about this totally benign, bland topic, Gutenberg. Morten Rand Henriksen is going to talk about the Gutenberg editor.
I don't know.
That will be interesting.
Yeah. It will be interesting.
That should be a lot of fun. We're also really lucky. We've got our speaker team has just killed it this year. We have, Andrea Middleton is going to be our keynote on Saturday, talking about community. So we'll kick it off with a community focus. We also have, I don't know if you guys know Matt Perry. He's an automatician. He's on the VIP team. He's here in Seattle, and anyhow, he connected us with a bunch of enterprise people. So we're going to have an enterprise panel that will be moderated by Scott Birkin, who also lives here. So we're really lucky in Seattle. We've got a ton of talent and a ton of really interesting folks. So those are some highlights. And Matt is also going to talk about the REST API, give sort of a primer for the, because that's just such a hot topic, and people are not, I don't know, there's a wide range of knowledge, but a lot of need for learning. So anyhow, so we're excited to see what Matt has to say about the REST API. We've also got, it's a big conference. We'll have 4 rooms going. 3 will be doing sessions all weekend, both Saturday and Sunday. And then on all day Saturday, one track we'll have workshops. We'll do an intro workshop and a JavaScript workshop. And then on Sunday, we'll have the contributor track in that room all day, Sunday. So it's going to be a fun weekend.
Oh, you're really tempting me, but
I'm impressed. Yeah.
I'm tempted. Seattle.
Seattle is just that bit too far away for me
Yeah.
to easily drive there. So.
Oh,
Well,
yeah.
we do have nice weather in November, so there's that. So, no.
Right. Yeah, I think you've given a really fantastic outline, Larry. And
Yeah.
like I say, if you can go, I think it'd be a fun weekend in a fun city, to say the least.
It should be great. Yeah, we have a lot of people traveling, but a lot of local talent too. I want to stress that there's we're able to draw some some of the international talent, but we didn't quite hit the WordCamp Central would like us to be at 80% local speakers. I think we're more like 70, but that's okay. Yeah. And we also have a blind vetting process, so it's hard to. It's an interesting process.
Yeah, exactly. I know a lot of WordCamps are going to that process, which I think is a great idea, actually. Well, thanks for that, Larry. And like I say, folks, it'll be in the show notes, and if you can go, I would definitely. It sounds a great weekend. I really enjoyed the Sacramento WordCamp a couple of weeks ago. It was a blast.
Yes, and WordCamp Los Angeles is happening this weekend, and I went to WordCamp Los Angeles last year, and Kim did too, and it's a great event. There was just no way I could prepare two talks for two WordCamps 2 weeks apart.
No, I was tempted, but I just couldn't. might try and go to the October Las Vegas, and I am tempted with Seattle. We just have to see. I am tempted.
Yeah, come on over. Hey, one other thing. I went to WordCamp Portland last weekend, and great conference, really good, great after party, good sessions. But the main discovery there was somebody has forked Cards Against Humanity, and I don't know if you know about the WordPress Against Humanity deck.
I think I heard about that once, and then forgot it. I've never actually played Cards Against Humanity.
Oh, I have no idea what you're talking about, Larry, but please rapidly inform us. What's this about?
Oh, okay. So maybe that's a U.S. thing. So Cards Against Humanity is just, have you ever played that kids game Apples to Apples?
Nope.
So anyhow, it's oh God, so this is, I really have to go. Anyhow, I describe it as Apples to Apples for demented adults is how I describe Cards Against Humanity. But it's a really interesting project, and it kind of is in our world in the sense that it started as an open source project by a group of people in Chicago who just wanted to create a fun, crazy new card game. And it's grown into this huge commercial thing that makes millions and zillions of dollars. And it's an interesting business model. If you just Google Cards Against Humanity, you can find tons of news stories about their story. But it's open source. You can just go to GitHub and find that WordPress fork or create. We don't have a lot of spare time on our team, but I would love to try to get a Seattle fork of that together. We'll see if that actually happens.
There you go. I had no idea what the hell you were talking about, Larry. And I actually live in America. I actually live in America, actually, and I had no idea. But there we go. I'm a sheltered individual, So let's go on to the first couple stories that are kind of linked. Matt Marway kind of published his reaction to the news from Facebook that basically they were changing their terms of use when it comes to React. And then in the piece that he wrote on his blog, he was discussing that it might be an idea that developers could use whatever library they wanted, and Gutenberg, whatever the hell it's called, would have a layer that would allow you to do that. But then there was a great article on Yoast from Omar Rice. Hopefully I'm pronouncing his name correctly. That kind of really said that, that wouldn't really fly. That's not a great idea and it's impractical. So I'm just going to open it out to the panel. Anybody who would like to start about these two pieces and then reaction to the news around React?
Well, I certainly understand being cautious about React after this, because Facebook has changed licenses before, and it would kind of suck if they, decided to commit to it and then, 10 years later, we wanted to put that patent clause back in, and so, the theory of setting up something that is framework agnostic is very appealing to me. But, I don't do a lot of work in JavaScript or understand frameworks that well. And the post about, why that's, easier said than done and might really limit extensibility, or just might turn out to be, it's like, well, you may say, we want to set it up so everyone can use it, but whichever one is, you're actually using to build this is going to be the one that becomes dominant, whether that's an official choice or not. And, those arguments make sense to me. I don't think I can judge them from a technical standpoint, but it does seem like it's not going to be quite as easy to set things up in a way where it really won't matter what you use.
Anybody else like to pass any comment?
Well, I'd agree with that. I mean, ideally, you stick with one thing, and then everybody is developing in the same way. We can set up a standard. People can follow other people's articles. Can you imagine if there was several different frameworks, and especially with people who are still trying to teach themselves WordPress and how to create plugins, etc. They're trying to lay out a new UI, and they're not 100% sure. I mean, it looks like rocket science. Half of these. If you're a new developer and you look at some of these frameworks, it really does feel like rocket science. And then if you're copying and pasting snippets of code, and that, you might even be copying and pasting the complete wrong snippet. So it'd be great if there would be people just sticking with the one thing. I'm actually one of those people, though, that actually worries about going in any of those directions. I mean, TinyMCE itself is I guess a third-party framework, and it's kind of stuck around. So this probably negates what I'm about to say. But I'm one of those people who really tries to avoid using any frameworks in anything that I'm doing if I can possibly, because I don't know whether that particular I don't know what direction it's going to go in a few years' time, if that makes sense. I don't even know if the community is going to leave it behind, and then we're going to have to rewrite everything. So I kind of get a bit worried. It's weird. I like the idea of being able to do either or, but then I think, well, if we're gonna create something that works with multiple different frameworks, why don't we just establish our own? We've got a huge community of developers. Can't we just establish our own, not use something else that could go in any direction, or not try and create a monster that supports multiple? I don't know. There you go. Thinking out loud. So,
no, it's a great point. But before that last point, I was thinking, well, isn't WordPress a framework really? But you kind of answered it with your last sentence, because it is, in a way, WordPress is a framework, isn't it? So why don't it have its own JavaScript library framework?
It would be nice if it did.
But maybe that the problem with that is...
I think that the core developers might have enough to do already. That might be one reason that...
What did you think, John?
Okay, so yeah, I was on mute, sorry. No, I definitely think that this was the right decision. I think it's just too precarious to have this open source GPL license framework that you're building, and then have some other framework that's got a different license rolled into it. And even though temporarily, or at least for now, like Facebook has relicensed a lot of their frameworks that they've built, I think the best thing to do is use components in WordPress that are going to be best for the project, and maybe not necessarily. And I think a lot of the React decision just initially had to do with that's what people who are core contributors were using, and so. But that might not be the best thing for the project. So I think that all things work out for the best in the end. So that's what's going on.
We hope so, don't we, John?
We surely do, but you know what? It's not the end of the world,
No, that is true. You can understand why React. I think that you're spot on why React was chosen, and for very understandable reasons. And what's happened is understandable, isn't it? Kim, have you got any views about this at all?
I think everybody covered them.
Yeah, it's true.
All sounds good to me.
There was such being last.
I know. Think of something new.
And our guest, I don't want to forget our guest, Larry. Have you got any thoughts about this at all?
I don't. My thoughts are more about Gutenberg just from a content strategy perspective, about keeping, kind of adhering to good practices about portability of content and things like that. So it's at a different level, I think, than this discussion.
Yeah, for this particular news story, but we must come back, and we're probably one of our round table topics will be about that. Sounds a great suggestion for a main topic. So we got another really big story, and an interesting story, I feel, and it's where did the plugin go? And this is about Sire Capture. Is that how you pronounce it?
The couple of I think it's SI Capture. At least I always just said it as a. But the display widgets plugin,
Can you give a brief outline what this is about first, Sallie?
Sure. What's happened is somebody's been going around buying plugins that were, fairly popular, had a lot of installs, been around a long time, and then injecting spam and malicious code and stuff into them. So all of a sudden, bang. We've got all these, all these infected websites, and it appears to have.
It's good news for me, isn't it, Sallie?
Yeah. Well, you've probably been, in employ, but it means that for people who were, relying on these plugins, they suddenly have to do something new, and it kind of points out a channel of vulnerability that it's become harder to get into websites by other means. And so this has been a way to get malicious code into WordPress sites. And I imagine by now that there's some awareness generated about it. People are going to perhaps be a little suspicious if somebody comes along and offers to pay them for their free WordPress plugin, because, that could be what it is that they want to do with it.
Yeah, well, what intrigued me about from the previous developer who has got nothing to do with this apart from sending his plugin, and it must be a little bit a nightmare having your name linked in any shape or way what's happened. It's got nothing to do with him, which is Mike Sherless. Is it Sherless? Is that he points out the person that bought isn't a fantastic developer anyway, because he did do a very good job, which is a blessing in a way, which I found interesting. What's your thoughts about this, Lee?
It just highlights how kind of vulnerable we all are in general, without being able to test and have a look at what's in each one of these plugins. We all just go ahead and there's two things. We go ahead and install any plugin sometimes as the stressed WordPress developer or as the stressed agency owner. You are going to see a plugin. It's going to look like it does everything you need it to do, and you're under a lot of pressure to get a site live. So you're very likely just going to go grab a plugin that essentially looks like it does what it's meant to do. It fills the gap, and you are actually vulnerable because you don't know what's under the hood without checking everything. And that kind of just highlights to me how kind of scary that is. If you're building a website in a rush, I feel like there is a space, and I don't know if this already exists, but I feel like there is a space for someone to kind of hold a lot of these plugins to account, someone to check these plugins out every new update and to do due diligence. And maybe that could become a paid service where developers could subscribe to this, and there could be a whitelist of plugins available, and every new update is scanned, by real people. They check out the changes, make sure there's nothing weird or new going on that looks dodgy, like is clearly going on here. So if anyone,
but Lee, there is.
I know security do all that, and they've got WordPress.
Well, there is. It's called WP-Tonic. I just couldn't resist it, Lee. I apologise.
Well, yeah, I think that
do you do that?
Sort of.
Well, you'd be surprised when we have a new client. You'd be amazed the amount of plugins that we remove, that we find that they're not the ones that are not active. The ones that are even active, when we really do audit and we delve in a bit and we've got the client settled down, on average we remove over 50% of the plugins that are active on the site because they're actually not doing nothing, Lee.
True, but I'm talking about every new iteration and update. So having some sort of service, because you're looking here at a tiny increment. So you've got 3.00. He adds to one tiny step increment of 3.01 some spam code. So it would be awesome to have to have some sort of service that can green light updates before you go ahead and update your plugin. And that might be something that corporates would be willing to pay for, because it just does highlight how vulnerable we are either to viruses. Someone could create an exciting sounding plugin and they've got a backdoor straight into your website. And even if the community spot it within 5 days, 5 days is plenty of time to do damage. So it kind of scares me reading this a lot. I never really considered it, because I always assume everyone's beautiful and nice. I know this was just spam rather than something allowing someone to get into the website, but this kind of scares me.
Yeah. I'm sure the plugin review team is going into convulsions, because the tricky thing about this is they vet all the plugins before they put them in the repository, but I don't think they've got a process for double checking every single small incremental update. And it's not a large team. I mean, it's only a couple of people reviewing most of these. And I don't know, it's sort of like, well, so, by buying an existing plugin, you get around that first security hurdle, but now clearly they're going to have to put some kind of additional security hurdle in, because, all these years we've been telling people, you can use plugins in the repository because they've been vetted. Well, maybe not at every step.
I'm going to put... Oh, go on, Kim.
Well, for mine, I love your idea of the service, Lee, because for me, considering that my audience are not developers like you guys and like we are, they are the do-it-yourselfers, and they're already having issues trying to pick which plugins. So for me, this is kind of extra scary that they're looking at this and thinking an update in the repository was safe, and then to find out it was a spam issue.
Yeah, but I'm going to put this to John, and see if John wants to comment on what I'm just about to say. I think it's a broader subject that's been a kind of theme for the past couple months on WP-Tonic in general, on the panel shows. This whole idea that WordPress is free. I really strongly advise people that if they've got a website that's getting reasonable traffic or they're making money from it, the whole idea of having a load of free plugins on your site, I'm not too keen on it anyway. What do you feel about all this, John?
Well, I think you're reading my mind, Jonathan, because it's definitely what occurs to me. And what I see sometimes with people that are trying to start a business around plugins, and they're using the repo. Why do you need to sell your plugin in the first place? Well, obviously you're burned out from trying to keep it up, and you're not earning any money. You're doing this volunteer work, and you are trying to do some freemium model, and it's not getting to the level that you want. We tend to think of some of the big plugins in our space, like Gravity Forms or EDD or Beaver Builder. These are all have they're either premium plugins or they have premium upgrades. And recently, all of these up their prices too. And it's like you just said, there is no such thing as free. People have to take time to upkeep these. And when they are just tired of doing that, they're either abandoned and in the repo, or somebody else, offers to pay for them. And I think that's a problem. And I think it's something that's deeper than just the plugins. It's something that's woven into the ecosystem. And you're going to see more and more people addressing this over the next year. There needs to be sustainability, because I run into way too many sites out in the wild where, agencies even are throwing in plugins to make something work because they don't understand that, this plugin hasn't been updated in 3 years is bad. So
that is bad. It really is gruesome when you come across that, isn't it? that is gruesome. What do you think, Sallie? Because I think it really touches some bigger issues, doesn't it?
Well, I think that that question of free, it is tricky. I mean, The freemium model works very well for some people because you expose a plugin to a large audience. But support is a big enough problem when people pay for your product. Never mind when they're getting it free. And yeah, some people they create a plugin because it's something they needed. They put it in the repo, and they graduate from school and get a real job and whatnot, and they're not paying attention to it anymore. And not everybody is going to want to maintain that forever. And I think it is reasonable, to expect people who are using a website for their business to be willing to pay for things. But I'm not sure how that's going to affect the plugin repo, which is also there for the people who are building hobbyist sites and, may not be in a position to invest a lot of money in it. And so it's like, yes, on the one hand, if you want to protect your business, you will probably be safer if you buy premium plugins that are going to be supported and keep all your licenses up to date. But I don't think that means that the WordPress plugin repo should go away, and therefore,
I wasn't
right, and therefore, how are they going to handle it? Because mostly, one of the things that we've told people to check about whether they're, a plugin is secure is, has it been updated recently? And yet, the problem with these, spam plugins is precisely that they were updated recently.
Yeah, that's exactly. I was going to put this to Lee, and it's kind of linked, but you just pointed out another aspect, Sallie. But I was going to say to Lee, if a plugin has been updated for almost 2 years, should it even be the repo? Should it just be removed if it has been updated in 6 months or something?
Well, in 6 months, it will still be compatible, more than likely, because WordPress are really good with the backwards compatibility, although with Gutenberg on the horizon, maybe that's all going to change. Who knows? But maybe after 2 years, it is questionable. I've seen plugins on there that will say compatible with version 3.1.2 or something ridiculous like that, must be up to. So it probably does not work anymore. And nobody in their right mind should have that version active. WordPress does not even roll out, as far as I'm aware, any patches for anything that old. I mean, the recent patch, they rolled back to 4.7.2, I think, because there was an issue on the prepare statement. So they rolled it back that far, but they certainly wouldn't roll anything back as far as 3.1 if that prepare statement issue was on that. I'm not aware that they would go that far back. Therefore, there would never be a security update or anything like that. So if there is a plugin that ridiculously old, I do question why it is in the repository, and feel that if anything, it could at least be in an archive section and labeled as such, so that people can understand the difference. They do put labels
on them. If something hasn't been updated since whatever, there will be a big banner across the top that says, this plugin has not been updated for at least 2 years, blah, blah, blah. And they had talked about taking them out, and I'm not sure why they decided not to simply remove them. Perhaps that is just a labor shortage issue. But at least they do put warnings on them. But that may only be if you are searching, and I'm not sure they'll come up if you're searching from your WordPress dashboard versus actually going to WordPress.org. But people ignore warnings, or they installed them back when WordPress was on version 3.1, and they've ignored their WordPress site and not done any updating. And
it was it's kind of fascinating. I've just on Wednesday I interviewed 2 agency owners that are in the Drupal world, and they were discussing the similarities and the difference between the Drupal world and the WordPress world, and about almost all the I think the term they use is components in the Drupal world, which are in the WordPress kind of plugins, and how they're almost all free, but there is no real support, because the people that are the person that's building the Drupal site is supposed to be the support, be able to take that code, look at it, develop it, and then support it. And that's it was an interesting discussion about how different open projects approach things in very different ways. Well, go on, Lee.
This kind of like starts to make you think of the cost of free, doesn't it, as well? Because I remember back in the day getting super excited about WordPress being free, etc. But over the years and years and years, no matter who I've developed a website for, they're going to have to keep paying every year or a few years for compatibility updates and changes, etc., to keep things running smoothly because of WordPress's ongoing cycle of updates and changes. I've stopped telling people how much a website's going to cost. I warn them, obviously, how much a website's going to cost initially, but from now, for the last 3 years, I've been educating them that it will never stop costing them as long as they are on some form of open source platform if they want to keep ahead of the curve. If they're going to build something from scratch that never needs touching after that, then probably don't go WordPress or even any open source tool, because you're going to have to keep maintaining everything.
The proprietary commercial stuff makes you pay for updates and ongoing whatever also, but this is the web. So whatever you build it in, even if you build it in straight HTML, you might not have to worry quite so much about security vulnerabilities and things, but eventually you are going to need to change it. And either update your technology or update your content or update. So, it's an ongoing cost.
Yeah, you go on. Sorry.
Oh no, I'm curious about to what Lee was saying about the free issue and what Sally's saying about earlier. She mentioned something about the overworked plugin repo team, and I'm just wondering a couple things about that. Just like how exposed is the data in the repo? Like, could a commercial entity say, "Hey, we'll offer a premium service that'll vet plugins for you, and you can trust the plugins in here because here's our transparent process for evaluating them, and yeah, it's going to cost you $6 a month or whatever it is." Has that ever happened? I wonder.
I think anybody could connect to the connect to the repo and have the code available. But then the thing is, if and provide information back. But I don't know. I'm not sure exactly how that would work. I imagine that if somebody wanted to do it, they could propose it and discuss it with the team.
Yeah, it just seems like something, because one of the things that came up when the repo relaunched their UI early, 6 or 8 months ago, whenever that was, and it just kind of came up how overworked they are, and I'm just wondering if it's something that might not ever be in the scope of the automaticians and the other core people on the repo team, that if some commercial, I don't know, I'm just speculating that some commercial entity might want to say, hey, we can give you more assurances that your plugins and themes are safe.
It's a very interesting idea.
It is, but it's also linked to the whole way. It's so linked to other previous conversations. It's such interesting the way that WordPress was set up. WordPress org, the foundation, the relationship with Automatic. You're dealing with a number of issues.
The two main people who vet the plugins are neither of them employed by Automatic, and they're volunteers. It's Pippin and Mika.
I don't know where to get the time from. It's what I don't. I have no idea. To me, it's a situation where you really need two tiers. You need a kind of business tier. These are plugins are vetted more, therefore a business website, blah, blah, blah. And the plugin producers pay a fee for us to check them over. And then you've got the hobbyist. These are not tested. They shouldn't be used on a blah, blah, blah. But maybe I'm deluding myself. Maybe
I don't know, but it brings up an interesting thought now that, WordPress.com is allowing plugins for the people who are on whichever, paid tier. it is, clearly, if they want to, maintain their status as, things are going to be secure and smooth and so on, they're going to have to, vet things and decide what they're allowing and not, or they're going to be really caught up in this.
Yeah, it's really a great point, Sally. They are going to have to do something, aren't they? Because it ain't going to be great if their system gets, kind of pointed out as not being secured. Not, it's not going to be great, is it, Sally?
No, I think if they are not careful, they could rapidly come to regret the decision that they made about allowing plugins. So,
well, I can only imagine it's going to be like WP Engine or some of the other premier WordPress hosting solutions. They will have a list of plugins that they will allow, or having a blacklist. It's easier to have a whitelist, really, isn't it?
Well, yes, because you pick a handful of things and say these are okay, and for figuring out whether something is or isn't okay, that's a lot more stuff that you have to check. The blacklist on WP Engine is actually pretty short. It's plugins that they have already noticed are super resource hogs and going to mess up your performance, and and basically anything else they actually discover on your site that's doing that they weren't aware of before.
Right. I think we've had a good discussion. I think we're going to go for our break. When we're going to come back, we're going to be discussing WordPress filters, actions, all that, hooks, all that stuff. What are they? How do developers use them? See what the panel's got to say about the main subject. We'll be back in a few seconds, folks. We're coming back. I think we've had a good discussion on some great news stories in the WordPress world community. And we're back. We're going to be discussing the main topic. I'm just going to throw it out. Does anybody want to open the discussion about the main subject? Or
well, I just looked up for, since we should begin at the beginning, the actual codex entry on hooks.
Does it make any sense?
Well, let me read it and you'll see. So it says hooks, actions, and filters. Hooks are provided by WordPress, and frankly, not just by WordPress. This is a thing that programming languages do, to allow your plugin to hook into the rest of WordPress. That is, to call functions in your plugin at specific time and thereby set your plugin in motion. There are two kinds of hooks, actions, filters with links. You can sometimes accomplish the same goal with either an action or a filter. For example, if you want your plugin to change the text of a post, you might add an action function to publish post, so the post is modified as it is saved to a database, or a filter function to the content, so the post is modified as it is displayed in the browser screen. All right, so Larry, as our token, I know no programming person, did any of that mean anything to you?
It sort of makes sense to me in the sense that I use Genesis and have read their documentation about how to do hooks and filters and stuff, and have done that. But I to me, it's just like the like a monkey in a box copying things. It's kind of the level I feel like I'm at. But I'm curious. I'm dying to hear what everybody else has to say about the bigger implications of this.
Implications. What would you say, Lee? If somebody is starting to become more as a developer, they've learned the basics of HTML, CSS, and they're really getting what is the importance of filters, hooks, and that in the world of WordPress.
I'm going to try and explain it the way I explained it to Larissa, and probably most developers will scream at me. Because there are a lot of cleverer developers than me out there. But when we've got a hook, we're essentially trying to. You've got a function. A function will do something. So in WordPress or in a plugin, you've got functions that will do something. And with a hook, you can essentially hook into that, and you can add your own code. You can make something else happen, either at the same time or before something else happens. You can even stop some other something happening, as it were, and take someone off a completely different path. There's all sorts you can do with hooks, whereas a filter is essentially there is a function that's responsible for the output, as it were. So something is being output by a function, and the filter is more grabbing that value and doing something else with it, grabbing whatever is coming out and doing something else with it, making it look pretty, changing it, making a calculation, whatever that is. So that's the difference between the two. The reason why we love them is because that allows us not to have to edit any core code of WordPress or any core code of a plugin that we have installed. This essentially allows us to add features to WordPress or add features to a plugin and still allow both the plugin and or WordPress to be automatically updated without everything we've ever done overwritten. So back in the day when I first used to install WordPress, I used to edit core WordPress to make things happen. Yes, thank you, Sallie. I learned within 5 seconds that you don't do that. And then
we've all done it, Lee. So.
Yeah, well, given this was literally back in version 0.93, all right? So
I think you probably would have. I did get involved just before version 3, so you're a lot earlier than me.
I remember when WordPress came out. I remember when it forked from B2. So that's back when I was using it. So yeah, so that's what I was doing when I first built sites, because that's kind of all I really understood. It was all brand new to me. But yeah, so for a hook and filter, so a hook allows you to kind of make other stuff happen, and a filter kind of allows you to mess with the output, and they're both brilliant to be used because it allows you not to touch any core code. So you can get a plugin that does nearly everything, and then with a bit of code in a separate file, make something else happen. And we love it.
Now I have to jump in here and be pedantic with, the thing I learned in my, intro to PHP course on lynda.com. They're actually both hooks. Actions and filters are both hooks. And what that means is a hook is literally, in the real world, a hook is something you hang you can hang a thing on. And a hook in programming is the same thing. It's a place where you can attach your own code to the existing code. An action is when you make something new happen. And a filter is when you change something that's already happening. And the more hooks there are, the more flexibility you have as a developer to modify things, without directly editing the code. And of course, as anybody who has ever, modified a theme and then had the theme update and overwrite all your modifications knows, it's not a good idea to try modifying modifying the files. This is why child themes were created. And the more hooks you have, it's like, it no doubt takes extra time to write things with hooks in them so you can think about how people can modify them. But then once you know where it is that WordPress or where it is that a particular plugin inserts a function, which is just like some code that you write that basically says, do something, if this is the case, do that. And so if oh, well, this is the hook where they put in, the content or the excerpt or so you can, filter the excerpt to change the number of characters in the excerpt, or to modify what your read more statement looks like, or to change things. And one of the reasons that people use frameworks like Genesis is that they have additional hooks to make it easier for developers to put in new code. So if you say, all right, well, I've added these custom fields and I want the content of the custom field to go, right before the post title, or right before, this, you can just use the hooks to rearrange them. You can use the hooks to say, oh, well, I want the featured image to show up, before the title instead of after the title. And the programming languages is that you use to write these things is relatively, short, straightforward, and clear once you learn a few things. And what I discovered very recently that I hadn't known is that you can actually use a filter to attach an action. It is, as long as there is a hook of any kind there, you can use it to attach an action, although it's a little tricky. You have to be, unless you are willing to completely, obliterate whatever the, whatever the was happening that filter output. You do need to do some extra stuff, but it's very useful. And I really prefer using hooks for changing, what shows up on a WooCommerce page or what shows up on an events calendar page, if I can, because the way those plugins and some of the others have said you can modify their output is, okay, we have all these template files. Copy these template files into your theme folder and then modify them however you want, which is great until the plugin updates. And there are updates for all their template files, and you have to go through and do a diff on all of those and say, oh, okay, so where did they change their code that I need to change my code, but still preserve my modifications? And that's just a huge pain in the where. So if you are only using hooks and they have not changed the hooks, then they can update those templates until the cows come home, and your code will still be fine.
That's a great point. Good. Sorry, Lee. Go on.
No, I was just shouting amen to that. Back in the day, we had the exact same problem with WooCommerce. We were constantly trying to kind of fight the battle of ever-changing templates. So for the last couple of years, we've been using hooks as well. Same with BuddyPress. So we never copy template files across anymore.
Right. Folks, that's a great point that Sallie and Lee have pointed out, and that's another reason I was going to ask John. That's another reason why buying Premier plugins, because you should get decent documentation as part of buying a premium plugin, isn't it, John? About, especially with those kind of plugins, that's when using filters and hooks is a good idea, isn't it, John?
Well, absolutely. When you're talking about something like a WooCommerce or a BuddyPress or an events calendar or even something like Jetpack, which is kind of freemium, they're going to be well documented as far as where you can hook into stuff. Something that you might find in the free repo, maybe there might not be places where you can, hook into stuff so easily, or you might have to figure out if there's even a place and where you would do that. Like Sallie was saying, actions is basically you're adding something to do at a certain point, and filtering, you're just taking the output and modifying it. But definitely with the premium plugins, you're going to have a lot more documentation and usually a lot more people that have demonstrated how to do something. So,
when do you make the decision that you're going to use the template hierarchy, or when you make the decision you're going to use a hook or filter? Is there, or is it just a case by case, or is there any kind of pattern that you make that decision?
It's pretty case by case for me, because sometimes you're not making a lot of changes. And sometimes you are. And some of it is like, well, how many what is going to be more efficient here? Is it going to be more efficient for me to create a template for, say, my custom post type archive and put all of the changes I want to make in there, and then know that, that code is only going to be dealt with when that template is called? Or, am I going to put a bunch of stuff in my functions file or my, create a functionality plugin that has to have a ton of conditionals in it, so that it only applies the code where it needs to be. It's with something like Genesis, when you make a template file, usually all you put in it are the extra functions you need, because then at the bottom you put in that little Genesis function, and it calls the whole framework and does all the rest of the stuff. So you're not like rewriting everything. You're still only modifying it, but you're putting it in a template file. So, maybe I, want to add something everywhere that could go in a functions file or a functionality plugin. If I say, I want to hook this new, banner area for important announcements on my site into, every single page. Or, I just want to make a small change on the, on the blog pages. And sometimes you have something you're going to do a bunch of different things depending on what post type it is. So, a lot of times it can go either way, but usually it's a matter of, if I really want all of these changes only to apply on a particular single or archive page, I will probably make a template. But it also depends a little bit on, which work am I doing for whom, and where is this? Do I want all of the, functions that have to do with my custom post types to go into the same plugin that creates the custom post types, so that they're never trying to call something that isn't there, or am I using other kinds of functions? It's been case by case for me. Somebody else may have a better method.
Well, I think because I think of the panel, you're the most specialized, i.e. you're committed to Genesis. I don't know, actually, Lee. I think both Lee and John, you're more vanilla. You will deal with Genesis, but you also will, where I'm not putting hopefully not words in your mouth, Sallie, is that you publicly specialize, that you use the Genesis framework day to day. So I've dabbled with Genesis, and I've dabbled recently. I haven't been doing a lot of development, so I won't call myself as a developer now, but I have done themes and a lot of manipulation of commercial themes.
Denwood.
Pardon?
Denwood, is that the name?
I would say it was a demo. I think I got more.
You said that.
Yeah, I did. I shouldn't say that because that's not correct. I'm more than a dabbler, I would say. But on the other hand, Lee, unless you're actively, it's always a problem, isn't it, Lee? Because if you've got your own business, you've got to generate leads and you've got to generate interest. But also, if you're not coding almost every day, it's quite rapidly, I wouldn't say you lose your skill, but it's not something that you're emphasizing. You're emphasizing building the business, isn't it, Lee?
Totally. I mean, but to go back to actions and hooks itself, when you're coding, you can make life a lot easier for you as well. I mean, I know I keep saying actions and hooks. It's actually actions and filters. It's my brain doing a brain fart.
Yeah.
But let's just say hooks to generalize. But putting your own everywhere that you're coding. So even if you're not using a framework, and Genesis is freaking incredible. I've personally never got on with it because I am a vanilla ice. I like to do things from scratch because I'm a geek, and we've kind of built up our own framework, I guess, over time. But we'll declare them anywhere and everywhere that we possibly can, to the extreme, probably like before the header or something ridiculous. So we've got all these different all these different actions that we can that we can use. Where we use them is Sallie has nailed it. If you only want one thing to happen on one page or one type of page, like a blog post, you might as well throw that in the single.php or whatever that is, because it's only going to ever happen once. It's pointless calling everything every single time. And then there is also an argument for then having things, in a functions file or in a plugin or in an include of some sort. Going to your thing though, on coding and running the business, I'm having that battle right now because I've now got a team of developers and I still want to code all the time, but I've got to do sales as well, and that's a really hard balance. So I feel you, man, and here's a man hug.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's going to give me a kick after the show, though. No, I didn't mean that. That was a bit of English humour. To wrap up, folks, are there any kind of reasons? Because I'm amazed. Well, amazed, it wasn't the right word. Sorry, folks. I'm still surprised at the amount of confusion around this subject, especially for the not the newbie, somebody that's trying to grow their knowledge as a WordPress developer. I think that's the right term. Are there any general resources that explain these concepts and also give good examples and just teaching? I'll start with Lee. Has anything come to mind? Any good resources?
A really good tool that we use nearly all the time, especially when we're dealing with plugins that we're not as experienced with, would be Simply Show Hooks, which is a plugin you can activate, and that's going to show you everything. You can switch it on, you can access a page either in the back end or in the front end, and it will show you everything that's going on. So if you want to show something in, say, WooCommerce just before the price, it's more than likely there's going to be something there, and it's going to show you it on the plugins, like kind of a little highlighted. It's going to actually show the actual name that you need to use in your code that you can then hook into and show something. So Simply Show Hooks is a fantastic plugin.
Can you put the link in the chat, actually, Lee, if you can, and then I'll make sure that's, because it sounds great, doesn't it? Sallie, any kind of resources, online resources that people that can learn more about hooks, filters, everything we've discussed?
I would say just check out basically any intro PHP course, and it will explain how actions and filters work, and run you through practicing some of those. And the WordPress doesn't use them in any particularly strange way.
Right.
WordPress adds its own hooks, and then plugins and themes add a lot of theirs. Lee has just dropped in a kind of guide to actions and filters, and so kind of the one of the main differences is that when you're doing something with a filter, you have to tell it what it's modifying. So it's like you have function name, parentheses, and if it's an action you're adding, you don't usually have anything inside those parentheses. If it's a filter, you have something inside those parentheses which tells you what you're modifying, and then you use that variable and say, here, in this case, this variable equals this, or this plus this, or this wrapped around this, or whatever, and then at the very end, return variable. And so it puts out the modification there. But yeah, it's kind of like, go do a little intro stuff for the concept, and then just practice, and you'll start to see. And there are, you have priorities with filters, so with hooks, because several things can be added to one hook, and so you may need to adjust your priority. The default is 10, kind of in the middle, but if you want it to come earlier, so if you want to be on the same hook as your title but you want it before the title, you would need to add a priority when you add your action, and say, I want this hooked in at 5 or at 8. And if you want it to come after, you might need to hook it at 12 or 15, and you just and very often you need to kind of, you may need to hook something before where it happens to get it to show up. So I've learned almost everything through trial and error, but I did find it really worthwhile to finally go through and do
I think it's a
PHP
mixture.
101.
It is a mixture. John, any kind of thoughts about resources and about how you grasped this and what helped you really get a handle on it?
Yeah, I mean, so anytime that you're hooking into a plugin, like Sallie mentioned, look for the text domain of the plugin, and then also, like, the other parameter will be the place where it's hooking in, and then usually like the function that you're like using. So once you kind of grasp that part of it, it gets a little easier. It's saying, but like she also mentioned, you might have to match the priority number if it takes that parameter at the end, meaning either 10, 20, or whatever number that it is in the original function. So sometimes that takes a little bit of research.
Yeah.
But definitely, like Pippin has a good course on plugin programming. That's a good place, and the Codex as well. So.
Yeah, that's great. Point out, actually, Pippin's got some excellent learning resources. You do have to pay for them,
That's fine.
I might add, but they're well worth it. And he's got some good materials. It's a good resource. Thanks for pointing that out, John. I think we're going to wrap it up now. I think we've had a good balance of news stories. Larry's been really patient through this part of the show. I'm going to let Larry tell people how people can find out about him and also the dates and the website for Seattle WordCamp. Fire away, Larry.
Great. Yeah. So Seattle WordCamp is November 4th and 5th. It's 5 weeks from tomorrow. And you can just go to seattle.wordpress.org and that'll redirect you to the current site. You can find me. My content strategy website is LSmedia, ELLESS media.com. And everywhere else, I'm just Larry Swanson at Twitter and Facebook and places like that. And I'd love to connect with you all. Yeah.
Oh, great. And we'll have Larry back when we've got a subject that's more in his domain. But he's been a champ coming on because he wanted to talk about Seattle. And like I say, I'll be thinking about going myself. Lee, how do people get hold of you?
Lee appears to have vanished.
He's gone. He's had enough.
Yes,
maybe
you'll have to find Lee over at angledcrown.com.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. We had enough of my filters and actions stuff. John, how can people get hold of you?
You can find me at my website, which is lockdowndesign.com. Are we down to you and Kim now? I'm saying like who's
No, Sally's here. Kim's here, I think, hopefully.
Yeah.
There we go. Thanks, John. And Sally, how do people get hold of you?
You can find me at WPFangirl.com. And I am at Sallie Goestch on Twitter. And if you can spell my name, you will find me. I am unique in Google.
Oh, that's great. And Kim, how can people get hold of you, my beloved co-host?
You can find me on Twitter at Kim Shivler or at whiteglovewebtraining.com.
And get hold of me, folks, is really easy. You can either Twitter me on my private Twitter feed at Jonathan Denwood or at the Twitter feed for WP-Tonic. You can email me at jonathan@WP-Tonic, or you can go on Facebook. I'm active on all the major social media platforms. It's been a great show, folks. Join us for another round table next Friday. We'll have a great panel. We're going to have some great topics, hopefully, in October. And we'll see you next week. See you later, folks. Bye.
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 Bye. Thanks.